It's just before midnight on Mount Everest. May 22, 2017. 29,000 feet up, in the part of the mountain that pilots call the death zone, there's a man crawling toward the summit. Alone. No bottled oxygen. No fixed ropes. No teammates. And he's vomiting. He's been climbing for around 26 hours straight. Food poisoning has hollowed him out. Every cell in his body is screaming a single ancient command. Stop. Lie down. Sleep. And up here, lying down to sleep means you never wake up. So why is he still moving? When someone later asked him about that night, his answer was almost insulting in how calm it was. The sickness, he said, quote, wasn't going to kill me. His name is Kilian Jornet. And 5 days after this night, he's going to do something that should be physiologically impossible. He's going to climb Everest again. I'm Sebastian, physical therapist and performance analyst, and this is the Injury Breakdown. Today we're opening up the most mysterious engine in the entire endurance world, because here's the question that has haunted sports scientists for over a decade. Most elite athletes peak in their late 20s, and then they decline. Kilian Jornet keeps getting better. He's winning the hardest races on Earth deep into his 30s, when the rulebook says he should already be fading. So is he aging slower than the rest of us? Or has he found a loophole in human biology itself? Stay with me, because by the end of this video, I'll show you the one uncomfortable truth about his ageless body that almost nobody talks about. But first, we have to go back. Because to understand the machine, you have to understand where it was built. Most of us learn to walk on carpet. Kilian Jornet learned to walk at 6,500 feet of altitude. He grew up in a mountain refuge in the Catalan Pyrenees, a stone hut perched at roughly 2,000 meters, where his father was a mountain guide and his mother taught mountain sports. While other kids were watching television, Kilian was outside in the dark, running through the forest with his mother, learning, in his words, to listen to the forest. Now listen to this timeline, because it sounds made up. By the age of 1.5, he completed a 7-hour mountain traverse with his family. By 5 years old, he reportedly summited Aneto, the highest peak in the entire Pyrenees, over 11,000 feet. 5 years old. He never saw it as training. He saw it as play. He once said, quote, instead of playing on the computer, I looked for animals or stones. Nature became, through playing, my life. And here is where it gets fascinating. Because that childhood may have physically reshaped his body. When humans spend their developmental years at altitude, while their lungs and blood vessels are still forming, the body can adapt in ways a sea-level adult simply can't replicate later. Researchers studying populations in the Andes and the Himalayas have documented larger chest dimensions, altered lung volumes, and rewired oxygen control systems in people who grew up high. Now, an important honesty check. Kilian isn't genetically Tibetan or Andean. 2,000 meters is moderate altitude, not extreme. So he's not a high-altitude native. But he is something rare. A lowlander who spent the most critical years of his physical development living inside a natural altitude training camp. Which raises the question that's going to run underneath this entire video. How much of Kilian Jornet was born, and how much was built? Hold that thought, because before we open up the engine, I need to show you what this man can survive. Colorado, 2017. The Hard Rock 100. 100 miles, over 13 mountain passes, with more than 66,000 feet of total elevation change. That is like climbing and descending Everest more than twice. Around mile 13, Kilian decides to slide down a hard snow slope. For fun, he falls, and he dislocates his left shoulder. For most people, that's the end of the race, probably the end of the season. Here's what Kilian does. He pops his own shoulder back into the socket. He tapes his arm against his body. He accepts a makeshift sling, and he refuses pain medication. Then he runs 86 more miles, over those 13 passes, with one functional arm. He wins. 24 hours, 32 minutes. His fourth Hard Rock victory. He later admitted the fall was, quote, doing something stupid. But he also called it one of his best racing memories, because it forced him to rewrite what the word injured even meant. So how does a body absorb that kind of punishment and keep going? To answer that, we finally have to look inside the engine. And I promise you, the most famous number about Kilian Jornet, the one everyone quotes, is the least interesting thing about him. Let's talk about VO2 max. It is the maximum amount of oxygen your body can use during all-out effort. Think of it as the raw cylinder size of your engine. For an average healthy adult, that number sits somewhere around 40. Elite endurance athletes hit the 70s and 80s. Kilian Jornet has been reported in the range of 85 to 92, one of the highest figures ever associated with an endurance athlete. But, and this is critical, there is no peer-reviewed study that nails down his exact number. These figures come from lab tests reported by coaches, and from his own sponsor materials. So treat it as a very credible estimate, not as gospel. And here's the twist that changes everything. VO2 max is not what makes Kilian Jornet special. I'll prove it. There was a Norwegian cyclist named Oscar Svensson who at 18 years old recorded one of the highest VO2 max scores in recorded history. So high that the researchers double-checked their own equipment. He was hailed as a future Tour de France champion. So what happened to him? Within a few years, he quit. He lost his motivation. He walked away. The highest engine ever measured, parked in a garage. Forever. So if a sky-high VO2 max doesn't guarantee greatness, what actually does? The answer comes from a landmark 2008 paper by the physiologists Michael Joyner and Edward Coyle. They showed that endurance isn't one number. It's three things working together. First, that VO2 max ceiling. Second, how much of that ceiling you can hold for hours, and the best athletes sustain around 80 to 90% of it. And third, economy. How little oxygen you burn to move at a given speed. That last one is the secret weapon, because economy alone can explain up to 30% of the gap between two runners with the exact same VO2 max. In plain English, Kilian doesn't just have a big engine. He has an engine that sips fuel and runs near redline for 20 hours without blowing up. How did he build that? Over a decade of training, roughly 1,000 to 1,200 hours per year, and the vast majority of it at low, easy intensity. That kind of volume physically grows the body's oxygen machinery. Denser mitochondria, more capillaries feeding the muscle. Scientists call it building a large biological reservoir. But there's still one piece missing, because going up a mountain is only half the battle. The other half is where Kilian becomes something nobody else on Earth quite is. What happens to your body when you run downhill for 2 straight hours? The answer is genuinely brutal, and it's next. Switzerland, 2019. The race called Sierre-zinal. 19 miles with a huge climb followed by a long, savage technical descent. Kilian had already won this race 6 times. So in 2019, he didn't just win again. He detonated the course record. He finished in 2 hours, 25 minutes, 35 seconds, slicing more than 3.5 minutes off a record that had stood since 2003. It's not the climbing that defines him. It's the descending. Kilian flies down steep, broken, ankle-shattering terrain at speeds that make professional runners look like they are walking. He describes it not as strength, but as dancing down the mountain. Now here's why that is so physiologically violent. When you run uphill, your muscles mostly shorten and push. That's concentric work. When you run downhill, your muscles have to lengthen under load to break your body, over and over. That's eccentric work, and eccentric work tears muscle apart. Studies on 100-mile mountain ultras have measured leg strength dropping by around 35% immediately after the race. Markers of muscle damage in the blood can rise to roughly 100 times their normal level. And full recovery of the nervous system can take more than 2 weeks. Kilian descends, at speed, for hours, and his body shrugs it off. Years of downhill training have likely stiffened his tendons into elastic springs, storing and returning energy, while his nervous system fires with surgical precision. That's not muscle. That's a finely tuned instrument. So now we've seen the engine. Which brings us to the real mystery. Because all of this should still fade with age, shouldn't it? Here's the cold, hard biology. After the age of 30, the VO2 max in an average person drops about 1% every single year. Your engine literally shrinks as you get older. But here's the loophole. In highly trained athletes who never stop training hard, that decline can be slashed to less than 0.5% per year. And there's a second loophole, the most important one in this whole video. Your fast, powerful, fast-twitch muscle fibers, the ones a sprinter lives on, fade early. But your slow-twitch endurance fibers and your cardiovascular system stay trainable deep into middle age. In plain terms, a sprinter is finished at 32. An endurance machine can keep going into their 40s. Look at the proof. A Canadian named Ed Whitlock ran a 2-hour 54-minute marathon at the age of 73. The Kenyan legend Eliud Kipchoge stayed world-class in his late 30s. The window for endurance greatness is enormous compared to raw speed. Now look at Kilian. He won his first UTMB, the biggest mountain ultra on the planet, back in 2008, in his early 20s. Then in 2022, at the age of 34, he came back and obliterated the course record. 171 kilometers around Mont Blanc, 10,000 meters of climbing, and he became the first human ever to finish in under 20 hours. 14 years between victories. An era in which almost every endurance athlete on Earth measurably declines, and Kilian got faster. So is he truly immune to aging? Here's the truth I promised you. And it's not the fairy tale. Kilian Jornet is not immune to aging. He's human. His maximum heart output and his VO2 max are almost certainly lower today than when he was 22. But here's the genius, whether he planned it or not. He chose a sport where that decline barely matters. In long, technical, high mountain racing, raw oxygen power isn't everything. What wins is fatigue resistance, tendon durability, pacing discipline, decision-making under exhaustion, and reading the terrain. And those skills don't fade with age. Many of them actually improve. A sprinter ages like a firework. Kilian ages like a glacier. Slow, relentless, and almost impossible to stop. It was never that his motor doesn't age. It's that he built a body and chose an arena where the aging is hidden so well that it looks like magic. But I have to leave you with the shadow side. Because this pursuit of human limits has a cost that no VO2 max can negotiate. In 2012, Kilian's mentor, the ski mountaineer Stefan Brosse, was crossing a ridge with him when a cornice of snow collapsed. Brosse fell roughly 600 meters, and he died. Kilian survived and was forever changed. In 2017, the legendary alpinist Willy Steck, the man they called the Swiss Machine, fell to his death on a Himalayan face while preparing for a climb much like the ones Kilian dreams about. The mountains don't care about your mitochondria, and Kilian knows it. He talks constantly about leaving a margin for error, and maybe that caution is the most important survival adaptation of all. So here's my final question for you, and I genuinely want your answer in the comments. Kilian Jornet, is he a 1 in a billion genetic accident? Or is he proof of what any human body could become with the right childhood, the right decades, and the right obsession? Born or built? Tell me below. I'm Sebastian, and this was the Injury Breakdown. Now, if Kilian shows you what a lifetime of mountain volume can build, the next question is obvious. What happens when a runner engineers that same engine in a lab on purpose? Is Jakob Ingebrigtsen a genetic miracle or the result of a cold, calculated experiment? Most people think elite running is about who can suffer the most. They're wrong. So go watch Norwegian Method 2.0, the end of high-intensity training. From the brutal history of Emil Zatopek to the finger-pricking obsession of Marius Bakken, it's the perfect next piece of this puzzle. I'll see you there. Keep moving.